It's terrible. I'm doing this painting and starting to work on it based on my feelings. And if I continue to paint based on feelings rather than logic, how am I supposed to explain myself to the younger Mark? How I learned art as a programmer. Well, for one, I had to stop thinking of it as something that only the creative kids could do. I had to believe that I could do it too. There are 4 parts to this video. Firstly, we define the issue. Why was it so hard to learn art? To be able to explain how hard it is to learn art, I want to first explain how easy it is to learn programming. I had so many questions learning art, but in programming I would write something, put it in my tests, and the tests run and they either tell you pass or fail. And it's so clear to see what you need to do. It's like programming is very, very black and white, whereas art kind of feels like it exists as more of a grey. In programming, there's this thing called test-driven development, or TDD. The benefit of TDD is that all goals are defined before one starts work. This makes programming super easy to learn because you can either get a fail or a pass for any work produced. However, for me, getting art to that same point was a little more difficult. Is this how you draw people? Well, what about this? Is this how you draw people? Oh, it looks different. What if I want to draw Naruto? Is that's like the same thing? Is that different? Is this still relevant? Isn't this just like copying a photo? I know for some people, untangling and learning art has always been easier than TDD and programming. But for me, and I'm sure many others, this very decisive right and wrong, black or white, learning encoding makes 1000% more sense. This video is to try bridge the gap for other people in the same boat, where this makes sense, but this doesn't. Divide and conquer. To me, programming progression has always made more sense than art. So in order to analyze art, I have to first break down normal coding progression and then apply it to art. Okay, so my brain has limited brain capacity, so I can think of eating, drinking, going toilet, and maybe like something else. So let's put programming into it. Like, oh, it's too much. It's too much. Thinking of programming as all the different languages at the same time is really stressful. But if we just reduce it to one thing, yeah, Scratch. Scratch is a programming language that's super accessible to kids, but the thing is, once someone learns Scratch, then they can move on to other things, and it's not so scary. I know some people recommend learning Scratch and then going straight to C. However, the point I want to make is that after learning one programming language, then approaching other programming languages becomes easier. Okay, so instead of thinking of learning programming as this giant chunk, breaking it down into one language or a smaller piece makes it more manageable. But how does this relate to art again? Well, this relates to art because it's pretty much the same thing when you try to learn anything. When I was younger, I didn't see different art styles as different languages. I just saw it all as art, and that made it really stressful to learn. However, once I started picking a style or picking a methodology and diving deeper into just one methodology at a time, things started to click together for me. In a practical sense, I executed this idea as I draw the figure. I'm not a huge fan, so what are some things about it I want to improve? Maybe I want to improve the hands. So I isolate just the hands and do studies. Next, I want to improve the head. So I isolate just the head and take a class on it. And then rinse and repeat, and slowly things start getting better. And if I spend more time on a drawing, I really can test the limits of how much I truly know and start isolating even more the things I don't. I did a haphazard constructive atelier approach. So pretty much I learned from... You may not know the following teachers or people, but they were really influential on me and taught me construction. Therefore, going back to this art list, when I see Michael Hampton, it's all within the same constructive approach, and his drawings make so much sense to me. In other words, Kevin Chen teaches construction, Kirk Shimoto teaches construction, Ramon teaches construction, Will and Watts teach construction, and Michael Hampton teaches construction too. However, even though I've never learned from Michael Hampton, because I've gotten a base from other people, I can look at Michael's drawings and try to decipher it without instruction. And it's not just construction and Michael Hampton. It's like I'm coming into the barrage of art programming languages, and I don't just have Scratch. I have the learnings of other teachers to help me analyze new information. And when I am correctly equipped to deal with new challenges, it's kinda exciting. Okay, so that was pretty conceptual, so I'm gonna try ground this a little bit through a case study. So the case study is gonna be this image, but before we start, I really just want to acknowledge and thank Will Weston for helping me persevere through the whole artistic process while making this image. I definitely couldn't do it without it. So as cool as it would be to go from blank canvas to full painting, just like learning Scratch before learning C, there was some steps involved. I think it's pretty interesting because at the start, me and Will were just drawing props and we didn't have any expectation to make an actual image. But then after drawing the props, he thought it would be fun to make some towns. And then he suggested, why don't you just copy and paste this a few times and try and make a town? And, okay, I kind of like it. Then after making the towns, turning them into rectangular compositions, and then from the compositions doing a value pass on top, then doing some color variations on those values, and finally getting to the actual painting. The whole process is pretty methodological, and even when I paint, I look at Craig Mullins for inspiration on how to paint, and then I look at Walter Everett for the colors. It's almost as if the whole painting is like art to me, grey and scary. But by having a process, it can be chunked into smaller, more manageable pieces and kind of makes it feel more black and white. And now finally, in the next slide, I hope this whole video will come together and finally make sense. At the very start, I said I'd try to bridge the gap between programming and art. With art, I said it was confusing because there was so many different things. So the way I've made it made more sense to myself is breaking it up into smaller chunks. Essentially making it appear black and white for the logical past mark. However, this is hugely biased. I'm completely ignoring the fact that TDD, our gold standard for black and white, is grey. Who decides what gets to be tested? Who decides what the tests even check? It's all grey, grey, grey. In addition, the confusion on where to start art exists in programming too. All of these languages, which one do you start with? The bias assumes knowledge on the progression of the chunking in programming. And now that I look at programming and art, they don't look so different anymore. It's not left brain or right brain, it's almost like a spectrum. Sure, programming looks black and white, and sure, art can be more subjective. But at the end of the day, you do use logic in both of them, and you do grey decision making in both of them. They're just rearranged and tiered a little differently. And I'm confident with the right guidance and teaching, all programmers can learn art and all artists can learn programming. Well, that was a really fun video to make. Hey, check it out. My dad was so proud of me that he printed that painting out on the canvas. Anyway, I'm going to try to do this full time, so if you would like to support, comments, likes, shares really help. Like and subscribe. But I just wanted to thank everyone who helped critique this video in the making. You guys know who you are. It means the world to me. And I hope everyone has a lovely day or night, wherever they are in the world. Take care, guys. Peace.